You're sitting at your desk at 11 p.m., rereading the same paragraph over and over. Your highlighter is running out of ink, your notes are color-coded. You've been here for 6 hours, and if someone asked you right now to explain what you just studied, you'd probably stare at them for a moment too long before realizing you're not entirely sure. You feel tired, yes, but more than that, you feel like you're doing something wrong, like everyone else has figured out a secret you weren't told about. Here's what's interesting. That feeling isn't a sign you're failing. It's a sign you're doing exactly what you were taught to do, and what you were taught has almost nothing to do with how your brain actually learns. We have this persistent image of the dedicated student, hours at the library, textbooks cracked open late into the night, a kind of quiet suffering that we've been told is the price of knowledge. But suffering and learning aren't the same thing. In fact, they're often inversely related. The more time you spend staring at information, the less likely you are to actually retain it, which means most of us have spent years mistaking exhaustion for progress. Let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying effort doesn't matter. I'm not selling you some fantasy where knowledge just appears in your mind while you sleep. What I'm saying is that effort without understanding how your brain processes information is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You can pour as much as you want, it doesn't mean anything is staying in there. So what does work? There's a term in cognitive psychology called desirable difficulties. It was coined by Robert Bjork, and it completely reframes what effective learning looks like. Desirable difficulties are challenges that feel harder in the moment but produce stronger, longer-lasting learning. The key word is desirable. Not all difficulty helps. Sitting in a chair for 8 hours isn't a desirable difficulty, it's just difficulty. But testing yourself, spacing out your practice, mixing up different types of problems, these feel harder because they are harder, and that's exactly why they work. Your brain doesn't learn through passive exposure, it learns through retrieval. Every time you pull information out of your memory, you're not just checking if it's there, you're actually strengthening the pathway to that information. It's like the difference between looking at a map and walking the route yourself. One feels easier, the other teaches you how to get there without the map. This is why rereading is so seductive and so ineffective. It feels like learning because the information becomes more familiar. You recognize it, but recognition isn't the same as recall. You can recognize someone's face and still forget their name the moment you need to introduce them. Rereading creates the illusion of mastery while leaving your actual ability to use that knowledge untouched. There's a concept from neuroscience that helps explain this. When you first learn something, it's held in what researchers call working memory. Working memory is limited, fragile, temporary. Think of it as a whiteboard you're constantly erasing. For information to actually stick, it needs to move into long-term memory, and that doesn't happen through repetition alone. It happens through struggle, through gaps, through the discomfort of almost forgetting and then pulling the information back. This is why the most effective study technique is probably the one you've been avoiding, closing the book and trying to explain the concept out loud, testing yourself before you feel ready, making mistakes. The mistakes aren't signs you're studying wrong, they're the mechanism of learning itself. Here's where it gets interesting from a psychological perspective. Most of us don't study ineffectively because we don't know better. We study ineffectively because it makes us feel better. Rereading is soothing. Highlighting is active. Taking meticulous notes feels productive. These behaviors reduce anxiety in the moment. They create a sense of control, which means the reason you're stuck in that pattern isn't ignorance, it's emotional regulation disguised as study strategy. Think about the last time you sat down to study something important. What were you actually afraid of? Not knowing the material, yes, but beneath that, what else? Maybe the fear of trying and still failing? Maybe the fear that if you test yourself and get it wrong, you'll have to face how little you actually understand. Rereading protects you from that confrontation. It lets you stay in the space where you might know, where you could probably figure it out if you had to, without ever having to prove it. This isn't a judgment, it's just honest, and understanding this about yourself changes everything, because once you see the pattern, you can work with it instead of against it. The ancient Greeks had a concept called anamnesis. It's often translated as remembering, but it means something deeper than that. It means uncovering knowledge that's already within you.
Socrates believed that learning wasn't about filling an empty mind with facts. It was about drawing out understanding through questions, through struggle, through the discomfort of not knowing and then knowing. He wasn't wrong. Modern neuroscience just gave us the vocabulary to explain why. So what does studying smarter actually look like? It's shorter sessions with more active engagement. It's testing yourself when you don't feel ready. It's spacing out your practice across days and weeks instead of cramming everything into one desperate night. It's mixing different types of problems instead of doing 20 versions of the same one. It's teaching the material to someone else or to yourself, out loud, without notes. None of this feels as good as highlighting. But here's the paradox. The things that feel like they're working often aren't, and the things that feel difficult often are. Your intuition about what's helping you learn is probably wrong, because your intuition was shaped by a system that valued time spent over actual understanding. And here's the thing they don't tell you. Mastering a subject isn't about memorizing everything within it. It's about building a mental framework where new information has somewhere to attach. It's about understanding principles deeply enough that you can reason through problems you've never seen before. The students who seem effortlessly smart aren't the ones putting in the most hours. They're the ones who figured out how to let their brain do the work it's designed to do. There's a difference between productive struggle and spinning your wheels. Productive struggle has direction. You're wrestling with the material, yes, but you're making connections, asking questions, testing your understanding. Spinning your wheels is staring at notes without processing them, reading without comprehension, studying without intention. One exhausts you and teaches you something, the other just exhausts you. So take a moment right now and ask yourself this. When you sit down to study, are you actually engaging with the material or are you performing the act of studying? Are you challenging yourself to retrieve and apply what you've learned, or are you just trying to feel like you've done enough? There's no right answer that applies to everyone, but there's probably an honest answer that applies to you. The smartest people I've known weren't the ones who studied the longest. They were the ones who studied with self-awareness. They knew when they were avoiding discomfort and when they were genuinely confused. They knew the difference between looking busy and actually learning. They treated studying not as a performance of dedication, but as a conversation with their own understanding. That's what studying smarter means. It's not a hack. It's not a shortcut. It's aligning your efforts with how your brain actually learns instead of how you think it should learn. It's choosing temporary discomfort over false confidence. It's being honest with yourself about what you know and what you don't know. You don't need to spend less time studying. You just need to spend that time differently. And once you do, something shifts. Learning stops feeling like something you're forcing yourself through and starts feeling like something you're genuinely capable of, not because you're special, but because you've stopped fighting against your own biology. If this is resonating with you, the next question is probably about what happens when everything you've learned disappears the moment you walk into an exam room. Or maybe you're wondering how to maintain focus when your mind keeps wandering to anything else. We'll talk about both. But for now, just sit with this. Studying isn't about hours logged. It's about moments of genuine struggle that your brain can actually use. And you've always been capable of that. You just needed permission to stop doing what doesn't work.